faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally talking books. Today, I'm going to interpret this book for you called The Good Life, A History of Middle Class Life. So, who exactly counts as middle class? According to China's National Bureau of Statistics, households with an annual income of 60,000 to 500,000 yuan are considered middle class. Oh, income isn't the most reliable standard, though. We should also consider spending habits and lifestyle. This book doesn't provide a clear definition of middle class. In the author's view, some professions definitely fall into the middle class category, like factory owners, pastors, and university professors. The authors of this book are Swedish folklorists Orvar Lofgren and Jonas Frykman. They're rising stars in ethnology. In traditional Western academia, folklore and history have long been disconnected. Folklore used to focus on rural and tribal areas, ignoring modern cities. Only recently has it turned to history, researching how modern civilization developed. This book zeroes in on the Swedish middle class from 1880 to 1910. Using Sweden as an example, it takes a super micro approach with materials like diaries, letters, newspaper articles, and even cookbooks. So next, I'll sort through all this complex stuff, mainly from the angles of time, nature, and household cleanliness, to talk about how the middle class defined the good life themselves and spread it society-wide. First up is the concept of time. Before the 19th century, farmers lived by the natural calendar. Their sense of time was tied to natural and work rhythms. Farmers decided what to do when based on changes in plants and animals in nature. For instance, a farmer in southern Sweden knew that when beech leaves start budding, it's time to sow oats. When marsh marigolds bloom to mouth size, at that size, folks should plant barley. When arnica flowers bloom, you can harvest licorice. But the middle class values rationality, efficiency, and self-discipline. They'd chop time into equal chunks, breaking it down to years, months, days, hours, minutes, and seconds. It's like filling in grids, scheduling tasks into each time slot. What to do when isn't based on nature, but on the timetable in hand. The middle class believes that this standardized, detailed time scheduling maximizes time utilization. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a popular booklet among housewives taught them how to efficiently manage household chores and time. Let's hear its content. As the saying goes, time is money. Therefore, in most cases, saving time is a person's only capital. A good housewife not only strictly adheres to time and plans her life, but must also demand the same from those who assist her. So, how did the middle class shape the concept of time? Just brings us back to the Industrial Revolution. The invention of the steam engine brought mass production by machines, and factories replaced workshops. Farmers from the countryside left their land and flooded into factories to become workers. Your concept of time was still that of farmers, following natural laws and rhythms. They weren't used to starting work at 8 every day, nor were they used to separating work time from rest time. The middle class was very dissatisfied with workers who held such views. In their eyes, these new workers were lazy and had no concept of time. In the 19th century, a British factory owner opened a textile factory in Sweden. He complained to a visitor that the female workers were too lazy, hadn't gotten used to high-intensity work, and were always chatting while working. But factory owners hire workers by paying for their labor time. So, how to improve workers' labor efficiency per unit of time became key to whether a factory could compete with others. Factory owners then decided to reform these newly urbanized workers. They then established strict timetables and rules, clearly defining workers' duties. Punish those who don't work according to the schedule. For example, deducting wages for lateness. Also, factories installed whistles that would sound every morning at the start of work to remind workers that rest time is over and it's time to start work. The appearance of the whistle made workers realize that rest and work times are strictly separated. Meanwhile, changes were also happening in rural areas. As farmers and merchants entered market competition, they hired landless farmers who became farm laborers. Farm owners wanted to produce more crops at the lowest cost, and they encountered the same problems as urban factory owners. The book gives an example of 19th century pastors complaining about craftsmen in their parishes. He said that when paying daily wages and providing meals, you'd always see them stopping to eat 5 times a day. Had only pitifully little work time, squeezed between meals. To address this, farmers and merchants started buying clocks and calendars, while schools also spread this new concept of time. Bells rang for class start and end. During class, you could only study, no eating or chatting, or you'd be punished to stand. Whether Chinese or math, everything was scheduled on the timetable. Children from both middle class and working class families received the same time education in schools, allowing middle class time concepts to endure. We must strictly follow time discipline, avoid lateness, and cherish every minute. Now that we've covered time concepts, let's talk about views of nature. Simply put, views of nature are how people perceive and imagine nature. For farmers, nature was their lifeblood. Their attitude toward nature was pragmatic. A carpenter might not know the genus and species of forest trees, but they deeply understood each tree's characteristics and what they could be used for. Spruce growing near swamps is good for weaving mats and fish baskets, while pine is suitable for making barrels. Nature was also magical, with farmers having various folk legends about it, like dwarves and spirits. The book also gives several examples of Swedish legends. Swedish farmers believed in a forest spirit called Skogra, who helped charcoal burners watch their kilns. If the fire went out, he'd relight it for the charcoal burner. But in return, the charcoal burner had to keep the area clean and not disturb surrounding animals, or the spirit would take revenge. So, in farmers' eyes, nature was mysterious. But with the Industrial Revolution and technological advances, nature's mysterious veil was stripped away. Science worshipping middle class dismissed all spirits and deities as superstition. They conquered nature with science, technology, and machines, making humans nature's masters. People lived in cities isolated from nature. But precisely because of this separation, the middle class developed a romanticized view of nature. The authors call this the new mysticism. Farmers used ghost stories to explain nature because they couldn't understand natural phenomena. The middle class projected their values and morals onto nature. For example, 19th century Swedish travel guides were full of majestic mountains, rugged canyons, and rushing rivers. People enjoyed mountain climbing for the sense of triumph after overcoming challenges. To mountain farmers, these city folks were just paying to suffer, sweating buckets, yet calling it leisure. But regarding nature, the middle class firmly upheld their values of science and diligence. Another example, they anthropomorphized animals, seeing them as human friends. In 1869, Sweden established a bird friends society that classified birds as good or bad. Bad birds lived on carrion and laid eggs in others' nests. Deeming such birds family-less, they gave speeches, carried banners, and planted trees for good birds while playing music in the countryside. Attention bird hunt opponents, this shows a key middle-class standard. Civilized people don't mistreat animals. Farmers kept livestock in their homes not from pity, but because animal body heat warmed the house. They didn't waste time washing pigs daily, nor judged sheep good for diligence or pigs bad for laziness. Sometimes they whipped animals, all against middle class civilized standards. To the middle class, farmers seemed unfriendly and backward toward animals. Though the book doesn't detail how they forced change, groups like the Bird Society promoted their views, condemning animal abuse and intensifying this clash of nature perspectives. Now, moving from time and nature to society. Before the 19th century, Sweden had rigid social structures. Nobles inherited status, farmers' sons became slightly wealthier farmers with little mobility. People were born in a village, grew up there, farmed, married, had children, and died there. If you asked someone in a village before the 19th century, who are you? It basically meant, where are you from? But the Industrial Revolution changed everything. New classes rose, and people could change their fate through hard work and climb upward. The farmers left their land and villages to work in city factories, making population movement extremely frequent. At this point, the originally stable social structure was broken, and people needed new social anchors. That anchor was family. The family discussed in this book includes marital relationships, parent-child bonds, and the physical environment, meaning the home. First, traditional family structures. In old Swedish society, the basic rural unit was the farmstead, not the nuclear family. People married mainly for practical partnership, with little to do with romance. Men farmed or found work outside, while women wove cloth and cared for children at home. Back then, men and women were segregated. Even when married, they'd separate into male and female groups in public. For example, Swedes went to church every Sunday. Men sat on one side, women on the other. Once, when a young couple in a town sat together, local elders got furious, saying they broke tradition. Children in Swedish villages were basically free range, once out of diapers and weaned. They started working. And in Swedish peasant society, children were harshly scolded by parents almost daily. If scolded, it meant they'd broken some rule. They subtly learned adulthood through this. Before the 19th century, privacy didn't exist. No separate bedrooms, farm owners and servants lived together. They commonly shared beds, left doors unlocked, and neighbors visited without knocking. A doctor traveling in northern Sweden in the early 1800s once sought shelter late at night. He entered an unlocked house and walked through before finding the entire family asleep. The hostess was awakened and asked if he could stay overnight. The hostess immediately agreed, got up and made the bed for him. As for the middle class, we mentioned before that peasant families worked together as a group bonded by labor. In middle-class families, only the husband worked. The wife was a homemaker. They didn't have a labor partnership. So what holds the family together then? It's love. This isn't some romantic drama clot, and we can't claim every 19th century middle-class couple deeply loved each other. But the middle class developed this cultural belief that emotion is the core of family bonds, allowing couples to show intimacy publicly, like walking hand in hand or hugging and kissing on the street. As for peasants' child-rearing methods, the middle class viewed them as quite irresponsible. The middle class had a comprehensive shaping plan for children's growth, with specialized teachers for etiquette and morals. Uh, Even mealtime became manners training sessions. Children must behave properly under parental supervision. If kids made mistakes, beating was unacceptable. Education experts advised parents to convey anger through tone and gaze, never physically. Now, regarding housing, the middle class highly valued personal privacy. Swedish middle class homes at the time created many boundaries and obstacles in entrances, hallways, and rooms. People grew accustomed to closing doors after entering, not wanting outsiders to see their privacy. In the 19th century, peasants entered cities and became the working class. Their family concepts remained like in rural times. Family was a labor unit. They lived in cramped spaces with big families squeezed into tiny houses. Neighbors formed alliances, helping each other like former farm residents. The middle class felt obligated to teach these country folks what ideal family life should be. Whoa! They promoted happy family ideals through newspapers, magazines, ads, pulp fiction, even offering loans for workers to buy homes. The book cites a government committee report. The report stated that undoubtedly owning a home helps strengthen workers' attachment to their community and even the nation. Even philanthropists proposed giving workers housing. So in 20 years, Sweden could have a working class evolved into civilized people. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the working class began accepting the nuclear family model instead of larger neighborhood alliances. Finally, let's discuss cleanliness concepts, starting with a story. In 19th century Sweden, an island developed stone mining. With sparse population, farmers welcomed migrant quarry workers, renting them houses with contracts specifying their right to use outhouse feces and urine. Why such terms? Because for farmers, feces and urine made fertilizer for fields. In areas with poor medical care, urine also served as natural disinfectant. A girl cutting her hand while harvesting beets in winter washed it with water and applied urine since she couldn't afford medicine. It healed faster. Swedish farmers then wouldn't wash hands after barn work before eating, disbelieving that skipping washing caused illness. Labor naturally brought dirt and odors. Fishermen smelled fishy. Farmers reeked of livestock. They didn't mind at all, even saw dirtiness as positive. As a local saying went, a farmer's hand should be dirty enough for the next seed to sprout. Dirt and waste weren't categorized as bad in their cleanliness concept. But to a contemporary middle class observer, farmers would surely be called savages. The middle class were disciplined and rational. Civilized people must fully control their bodies, not follow instincts. In middle class homes, children couldn't eat at the table with adults until mastering civilized table manners. If children drooled, burped, farted, or ate voraciously, by middle class definition, they remained animals, not human. To the science following middle class, dirt, dust, feces, filthy livestock, and strange odors were potential disease sources, deemed bad in their cleanliness concept and must be avoided. To show they're an exceptionally disciplined and rational class, totally different from others, more and more things got added to the taboo list, eventually affecting language and behavior, middle class sensitivities in certain areas. Sometimes their conservatism seems downright laughable. For example, if someone has a stomach ache, they can't say it directly. They got to say pressure below the heart. Mentioning the stomach outright becomes indecent. Compared to farmers' traditional cleanliness views, the middle class labels way more stuff as unclean. On one hand, because they worship science, medical science proves this stuff harms humans. On the other hand, they want to distance themselves from so-called backward classes. The middle class rarely admits to discriminating against lower folks. They avoid contact with farmers or workers, claiming it's not dislike, but because they're unkempt and grimy. But what's dirty and what's not is really just a value judgment. Like with family views earlier, the middle class feels a strong duty to teach other classes about good living, actively pushing their cleanliness ideas. For instance, in the late 19th to early 20th century, a Swedish journalist worked hard to boost workers' hygiene. He said, "These workers sleep on filthy floors, wear clothes for months without washing, reeking of sweat. They eat sloppily like stinky animals all over." He believed people are just scared of their smelly bodies and despise their clothes. Back then, many charities desperately tried to improve workers' and farmers' hygiene, donating clothes and urging them to follow rules and stay clean. But for workers and farmers who couldn't even eat enough, this help was ridiculous. Okay, we've covered the middle class's concepts of the good life. The book's opening quoted the Swedish encyclopedia's definition of culture, including refined manners, rational laws, cultivation of arts and literature, kindness to animals, and such. Through today's talk, you'll see these are actually the worldview culture touted by the middle class, a subtle presentation of their outlook. In the 19th century, the rising middle class was busy creating a cultural constitution. To distinguish themselves from old classes, they drew boundaries everywhere, shaping their ideal life while promoting their lifestyle to make all backward classes live well. But this wasn't just simple change or obedience, because through this process, the middle class steadily strengthened their beliefs, and the lifestyles they created profoundly influence our lives today. All right, that concludes our interpretation of the good life. Keynotes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.